Good morning, everyone. Glad that you are tuned in to All Things Dr. Leo and my great guest. I'm really honored to have with us Dr. Andre Thomas. Dr. Thomas, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. So glad to have you with us and to take this time. I know you're busy, but we have a lot of questions.
Okay.
A lot of information that you'll share with the time permitted. I know you've got a little short window of time, so we're going to get going here. So tell us a little bit, Dr. Thomas, where are you originally from?
Wichita, Kansas.
Oh, wow.
Right.
What was that like? What was your introduction to the world of music there, and who inspired your musical prowess while you were in Wichita?
Oh, there was a lot, but my interest in music began in the church. I went to Tabernacle Baptist Church. That's where
Wow.
my mother attended, and there were two ladies there that I always talk about. Lenora Bethel and Vera Crane, and they conducted the choir.
Oh, wow.
3 or 4 years old, I'd look at them, and I'd come home from church, and then I'd play church at home.
Wow.
A little toy piano, I'd bang on it. And one day, my mother said, "That sounds like What a Friend." I said, "It is, Mama. You want to hear What a Fellowship?" And I'm just banging away. And I think that's immediately when the ear began to develop.
No.
And that was the start. I so admired them. And it's really amazing because that was choral music, choral music in the Black church.
Right.
And,
Right.
they both led the choirs. And later on, when I turned 14, I took those choirs.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my beginning. It was Tabernacle Baptist Church.
So how old were you again when you started that? When that happened? When that interchange with the ear and all? Do you remember how?
I think about 4 years old.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's amazing. So you kind of telling us how you transitioned to an interest in choral music. So it was with the church, and did that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. It was the church. And it was through public school that I gained really access to Western European music.
Okay.
A little bit I heard at my own church, growing up.
Wow. What was your school? What's the school? Was this in middle school or high school? Or how did that affect you? Were you in
It was segregated back then, obviously.
right?
I went to an all Black elementary school and an all Black junior high. My mother was a coach cleaner. She cleaned buses for Continental Trailways. And so she raised us alone. And when I got into junior high school, I was expected to get to class on time.
Right.
I had honors math. And those teachers we had back in elementary school, hey, they were some tough teachers.
Yes.
We were leveled out A, B, and C, Right. So I had honors math. And I'd get there sometimes at 10 o'clock or 11 because I could walk to this school because I lived in Northeast Wichita. And so my sister, who was the first Black teacher to teach at the secondary level, because back then Black teachers could not teach at the secondary level, not. And so she taught English and German clear across town, almost 20 miles away at South High School. So my mother petitioned the school board, and in 8th grade, I integrated a school. It was Truesdale Junior High School, and at that time it was 2,000 and me. That includes custodial staff. So it was an interesting journey because when I went there, the 9th graders blocked the door, said we're not going to have one of your kind in this school, and of course the bell rang and I went in. And then I found the music room, and the teacher was different. He said to me, "Do you play a musical instrument? This is music." And I said, "Yeah, I play the piano." And he said, "Well, do you really play the piano? Can you read music?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, let me hear you play something." So I played the Brahms Ballade in D minor. And he was kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
And then he transferred me out of that class, and I became a member of the Lads and Lasses, and we had all the kilt stuff. Then went on to South High School, where we were the Colonels, and our school song was Dixie. And then I went to Friends University and became a singing Quaker. So life's been interesting.
Yes. So, applaud again. We celebrate your mom who identified your gift from whatever that hymn was that you played again. What a Friend We Have in Jesus, whatever it was at 4 years old, to recognize, not to allow you to just say, okay, we're just going to do the ear by rote, but she moved you into some serious training. How old were you when you started taking lessons?
Yeah, that was interesting because my mother really did not want me to be a musician.
Wow.
The musicians she knew were in the club and in the church, and she said, no, I don't, I'm raising my boy by himself, and he's not going to be one of those musicians. So she refused to get me a piano. And one of the members of the church, Mrs. Wafer, had an upright piano that she put on a truck, and the movers moved that piano into my house. So I had a piano.
Wow.
And by that time, I was 5, and Mom sent me to Miss King, the local piano teacher. And so I had to purchase my John Thompson Book 1.
Right.
And so I went in to see Miss King, and it's Music Land. It's the first little C in the pentacord. And Miss King sat down and she played it. Yeah, bum 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 bum. And then she said, "It's your turn, son. Now get your fingers in the right position." Right. Well, I just plopped down and I played it back in B flat. And so then she took her ruler and she hit my hands.
Right.
And I got up and I said to her, I will never forget, my mama said, "All you folks are crazy. I'm done." I quit. And I took some lessons from John Meeks and Sharon, who were at the church,
Yeah.
And then I just, and I thought, okay, I can do this. I mean, because my sense of rhythm was not good in the sense that I couldn't conceptualize rhythm by singing.
Right.
It was easy, the note names, that was easy.
Right.
And where they were. And so sometimes if no one had played it for me, my rhythm would be off, but I went to Wichita State University. At this point, I'm 12. And I go to the music building and I see a studio and it has a grand piano on it.
Right.
And so I knock on that door, and it was the studio of Frances Wallingford. And I say to her, she opens the door, she says, "Can I help you, young man?" I said, "I need a piano teacher. You teach piano, don't you?" Yeah. And she said, "I'm professor of piano." And I said, "That means you teach, right?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I need a teacher. Will you teach me?" And she said, "Who have you studied with?" And I said to her, "I've studied with John Thompson, and he has a book." and she laughed, and she was like, her hair was just all over the place. She'd take her fingers and go up, and it was just like Einstein is what her hairstyle was. And so basically, she took me, a marvelous teacher. And in that short time, we started Brahms, which is, you think you don't give Brahms to a 12-year-old.
Right.
But the D minor ballade is about the story of Edward. And because she was such a marvelous teacher, she told me the story. And then she related the story to various sections of the piece. And so I came across with a rather mature interpretation of the Brahms because I was playing the story.
Yes. Wow.
And so she took me to the Confederated Women's Club, and I won it.
Wow.
I won that competition. And so that began the study, the formalized study of music, especially from the Western art tradition.
Yeah. Right. So we gather the information out, your formalized study with piano, your introduction to choral music. So along those lines, so how did you move on? We're going to talk a little bit later about your wonderful publication, The Way Over in Beautiful Land. But so tell us about your introduction to the Negro spiritual. Was it during that time, or had you heard the spiritual?
No, that was earlier. That was still in church, you know.
Wow.
And it was all blended at that time.
Yeah.
I certainly, I can't compare the music at Tabernacle to the music at your church. At your church, there's this, there's orchestra, and with us, I heard some spirituals, and I also heard some anthems. The top 10, I Will Give Thanks, Let Mount Zion.
That's it.
Those, the heavens are telling.
Yes.
The top
war horse anthems. That's it.
Those were the war horses that I heard. So I heard those, and of course the hymns.
Right.
But the hymns were all done in a gospel-like way.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's see, the hymns were done that way, the anthems, the gospels, and the spirituals. And we had the lining of the hymns, which I still miss today, because there are not many churches that allow it, because they're all in the praise teams. But that's a tradition that I hope we don't lose, but we may. And then it was really the men's course where the spiritual started coming out, because you remember the days of the quartets?
Yes, yeah.
You had the quartets, like the Five Blind Boys, using bass, and then you had those a cappella quartets. Yeah. And that's where the spirituals started to come from, those a cappella quartets with them patting their thighs, and so that began the interest there. But then that didn't quite equate when I went to junior high and high school, because those arrangements we did weren't the same. We weren't really singing Dawson at church.
Right.
We were just sort of singing, the spiritual tunes. And when I will never forget, when I got to high school, we were doing, was it Dawson's Sooner Will Be Done, I think. And the teachers, said, okay, she stopped, and she says, well, you take that solo. And I went, there's no solo in this. And she says, you know how you guys do? And I went, So I hated that quote unquote spiritual that we did at school, primarily because I felt like it was white people getting a chance to try to make fun of Black people, and I was embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't a lover of that at all until my first year, when Jester Harrison came to Friends University. And it was Jester that so changed my life, because there were two factors behind that. He was a masterful teacher. Jester, you know him. He's such a people person. And as a good teacher, you observe into the whole surroundings around you. And of course, it was not difficult to see me, because there, at that point in time, there were 3 of us in the choir. My first year was just me. Yeah. And there were 3 Black people in the choir, so you could easily see who I was. And we had a little break, and he said, son, can I talk to you? And I said, yes, sir. And he said to me, you don't seem to like this music very much. And I said, no, sir, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I hate this music. And he said, what is it that bothers with you? And I said, sooner will be done with you, and he said, well, that's not even my piece. That's Dawson's piece. And I said, I know, but yours is not much better. Cocky little person I was. And then he went on to say to me, well, I think what it is bothering you was dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And that man took the time to explain to me about, THs and what societies, had no TH. Chinese don't have TH, Germans don't have TH, Spanish don't have TH. Said, so your ancestors accommodated. And he went on and on, to tell me about the R's and dropping off the R's. And I went, wow. And I was taking Madeline Marshall's, I was taking English diction class, and Madeline Marshall's book on English diction. And I went, wow, my ancestors knew 200 years ago, good singers don't sing those R's, And he took that smart aleck kid who was embarrassed about his heritage and made it my life's work. And I will forever be grateful to him because it's come back full circle so many times.
Yes.
So many times. And I remember being at Texas and we were, I was judging a festival. This was like my first year of teaching, and choirs came from all over Texas, and there were 3 adjudicators, and one adjudicator went up. And Eagle Pass High School came up from the Valley, all Hispanic school. And they were, their first number was Now Is the Month of May of Thomas Morley. And then they were going to do Ave Verum Corpus of Mozart. And they were closing with an arrangement by Andre Thomas called Keep Your Lamps. And I went, okay. So they sang, and the teacher did not know that I was one of the adjudicators. So one of the adjudicators goes on stage, and it just so happened that it was my turn. And Naomi was going through her Chicano period, so she was dressed in leather, and I was still in my Afrocentristic period because I still had, the days when you had to braid it, every night.
Yes.
I was still braiding my Afro, so it would be, I never wore braids, out in public, but I braided at night to keep it out.
Wow, no, that's interesting.
That hair was ringing. So they said, they finished Keep Your Lamps, and they were doing it was interesting because it was keep your lamps trimmed and burning, keep your lamps trimmed and burning, keep your lamps. And then she even changed the rhythm. The time you draw and I keep your lamps trimmed and burning. And they were bobbing, they were going along. And so then the announcer said, ladies and gentlemen, your clinician for this evening is Dr. Andre Thomas.
Right.
And I heard Naomi go, oh, shit. Then I went on stage and I looked at those children because you never blame children. And I said to them, I said, that was really energetic. It was energetic and it was fun and you seem to enjoy it a lot. And I said, I've never heard it that way, but let's tell you what I had in mind in making the setting. And so we went through a number of things where we talked about chains and shackles and I had them move. And at the end of that festival, I was out in the parking lot and I heard, sir, and there was this young lady. And I said, yes, dear. She said, I want to talk to you about that piece that Hispanic choir did. I said, yeah. She said, it made me. I said, what is it, dear? She said, it just made me. I said, what is it? She said, it made me feel so black. And I hugged her neck and I said, it makes me feel black too. And I thought, well, thank you, Jester. It's gone full circle. Yes. Here's a young Black woman who is now embracing her heritage because of the music of our ancestors. Yes. And, it's always been a part. And I have always, throughout my career, nobody gets, and I tell my young Black students who come in, never be embarrassed of your heritage. I mean, never. Nobody gets to take that away from you. And they're often worried, well, I'll just be labeled a conductor of spirituals, or I said, so what? They don't get to do that. No one gets to take your heritage away from you. You should be able to perform the music of your heritage and perform Bach too. You know, that's who you are. But never let people make you feel embarrassed of your heritage. Right. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. You know, people will label, you know,
right.
And as I said to, you know, as I've said to some of them, and this is predominantly my African American students. Well, no, I've told it to all students. You know, when I walk into the room, the first thing they obviously see is that I'm black. I'm a black man.
Right.
And I'm not going to apologize for that. That's who I am.
Right.
But when I leave the room, that should not be the only thing they know.
That's it. Right.
That should not be the only thing they know, that they know, oh, I had this black conductor. And yes, role models are extremely important. You know, they really are. There have been so many in my life. You know, Jester wasn't the only one that he certainly turned a circle for me, because I had isolated church from the rest of the world.
Yes.
Church was comfortable, you know, just like being in the neighborhood. It's Northeast Wichita, in the neighborhood. Yes. And I remember as a little boy, you know, people who were Caucasian, I only saw when I went downtown to get clothes and go back to school. Right. You know? Versus a man now who's seen most of the world and almost every nationality that one could expect. So I will forever be grateful. And I remember it was a national convention where of ACDA where we were to honor Jester.
Yes.
Okay. And they asked me if I would lead the honoring at the end. And I still have this picture in my office at school of Jester. And of course we sang Poor Man Lazarus. You know, but I also remember we did it in the first session and Mr. Dawson was sitting there. Wow. And so he got upset. So we were in 2 tracks then. We were smaller. Yeah. And so we had to take Mr. Dawson to the second track at the same time. We were honoring Jester. But those two were quite a pair. No different than Robert Shaw and Roger Wagner. So
yes. This is good. I'm gaining so much. You already answered the question I was going to pull in. How did Jester Harrison affect your your training and your realization about the Negro spiritual? So you've covered that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was immense. You know, Jester was they sent him every place. You know, he's probably the only person that did the mass sing in Estonia. You know, Estonians have 30,000. They sang their way to freedom, and it's a festival that happens every year. Right. With 30,000 singers. And of course, way back then, Jester did that. And 6 years ago, the Latvians did the same thing. They sang. And I got to conduct 17,000 of them. And I kept thinking, you know, only because of Jester.
Yes.
Jester is the one that I always equate to. I'm not an actor or anything like that. I can't identify with that part of him. I've appreciated it. But as far as a taker of our music, it's the best thing. I am so sorry.
That's okay.
That's what Jester was for me. And I learned from Dawson too. Yeah, as direct as he is, you know, there's so much that I learned from those people. And it's kind of funny. It'll be interesting to get to heaven and talk to Miss Crane, Miss Bethel, and Jester, and all those people along the way.
Yes, you know, and I remember one experience, Dr. Thomas, I had when I was 15 years old. I would one of my first experiences with the spiritual was through Charles Clancy, but also my dad took me to Ebenezer Baptist Church, which was a really fine Black church back in my day, back in the 60s and 70s. There were a core group of churches that really emulated really fine music. And so Hortense Love was the minister of music. So we put the Messiah every year, which was just we'd attend that. She'd bring in the greatest, the best of the best soloists. But anyway, they brought William Dawson in for that experience. So it just blew me over just watching him rehearse, how he interacted with the chorus, how he interacted with the pianist, telling her you're not playing all those notes correctly, so you might as well stop. It was just amazing. But one of my experiences going into Carl Fisher, I would take my allowance and buy an anthem every week. Just to sight read or just to read through some of it.
I could read it in Chicago.
Hear it, yeah, in Chicago. So I would hear it and do that. So, but anyway, they would have the gospel music. They would have an area called, I think it was gospel, if I can remember. And they would put all the spirituals in this category.
Right.
Of gospel music. And I remember I had to have been about 16 years old. I don't know what got into me that particular Saturday. I snatched these about 3 or 4 of them out of that thing, went to the counter, and I put them down there. I said, these are not spirituals. You keep classifying these as spirituals. These are neat, as gospel music. These are spirituals. Sooner we'll be done. They just had the Dawson, just the big, all the Dawson stuff. I think they had a Betty Jackson King, Lena McLean.
Yeah.
Who were Chicagoans at the time. So they had all those linked, about 3 or 4. And I later snatched down. The guy was looking at me. Well, I don't know. So I said that to say, can you tell us a little bit about the variance? We have a wide audience. And so, we're running into now within our churches, the difference between the two and the importance of the spiritual, because some churches don't deem the spiritual, those sorrow songs. We don't want those in the church. Our thinking is more positive. We don't want that text. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's a shame that in our seminaries that we don't do better with our preachers.
There you go.
And and with with the training of our church musicians.
Yeah.
The value, I don't know. I sat in South Africa, okay, because I had to judge a category that was and the South Africans label certain things as spirituals too. I'm talking about Black South Africans now, not most of the music that we hear from South Africa. For me, spirituals have a very distinct time period and a very distinct, just a distinct time period. I don't equate music after 1865 as spirituals. I equate it as music from the Black experience. And, in the Great Migration, that's where I deemed that gospel music began to flourish and grow. The slave song, the songs from slavery that are sacred, those are the ones that I deem as spirituals. Now, we have various settings of spirituals, and we need to understand those and not equate them. We have what we call the concert spiritual. And that spiritual, I would say in the traditionalists, we're talking about John Work, we're talking about Harry T. Burley, we're talking about those settings. And I think one has to clearly understand the life of those musicians at that time. Thank goodness they took the bigotry of, because for a Black man to get music published by publishers was tough. Backing. And so they would allow them to publish, that of their own people. And so they took that and they poured into it everything they knew from Western art music.
Wow.
And Dawson was an example of that. I mean, the use of counterpoint, the use of, and I remember Mr. Dawson saying to me after he keep your laps, he said, "Son, your music's all right, but it just don't have enough counterpoint in it." And I said, "Okay." I said, "But Mr. Dawson, do you really believe the slaves were in the field singing in fugue?" And he said, "Don't matter." And I went, "Okay." And then when the trumpet sounds came out and it had piano to it, "Son, you using that piano?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And I will never forget, it was the Western Division of ACDA, the Southern Division of ACDA in Winston-Salem.
Mm.
And I was introducing a new arrangement at that time of mine called Rock in Jerusalem.
Okay.
And in Rock in Jerusalem, in the first half of that, I wanted to pay homage to Jester. But the second half of it, it was to pay homage to Mr. Dawson.
Mm.
And I remember, and as you know, in Rock in Jerusalem, it is set, Jester's Elijah Rock, shout, shout, shout. And then the trio part, Elijah with the women. And Jester refers to having an experience with watching the Catherine Dunham dancers. And that came through his mind as he began to make that setting. And so in my Rock in Jerusalem, I hear rocking in the land, rocking in the land. And then the three voices, I hear archangels. And that is, that's just a gesture. Okay.
Yeah.
And I happened to look down and see who was sitting in the second row, and it was William Dawson. And he was like this.
Oh.
And then we got to the last half, which has the little straddles in. Walking in the land, walking in the land, walking in the land. And I happened to look back down, and Dawson went like this. And so when the session was over, he came up on stage. Son, come here, son. I went over. And he said, come here, you got to get close enough. I want to hug that neck of yours. He hugged my neck. And then he said, son, I said, yes, sir. He said, that's a little better. So it was like, okay, Mr. Dawson. But those were the concert spirituals, When we think about people like Richard Allen and that first hymnal set, including those spiritual settings, it was set kind of like a hymn. And you got to remember that those itinerant preachers that came into the plantation to preach to us, and of course, religion was used to help keep us enslaved. There's no, they weren't interested in our souls. They were really, if you saw Nate Turner, that movie with about Nate Turner, you would see how religion was utilized, and it's interesting because the use of religion, what does they say? What man intends for evil, God intends for good. And that's exactly what happened in our lives. So they brought not only those stories to us, but they brought to us Southern hymnody. And that's what Brazil was talking about. I did an interview for National Public Radio and interviewed all of these guys. And Brazil says, I'm interested in what is the authentic spiritual. It was simply set. Okay. So if you look at Brazil settings like hush, 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 it's in that simple setting. Richard Allen setting, it's in that simple setting. Keep your lamps in that simple setting. At that point in time, I didn't care about whether or not it would get published or not published. But the Rock in Jerusalem is in that concert spiritual setting where Western ideas, Western art music is enveloped into the setting of that particular piece. When you look at Moses' setting, of course, that's your dissertation, so I won't talk about Moses, but you will see that influence from those traditionalists in his writing. You'll see that really clearly. And I don't get bent out of shape when somebody says, oh, there's a piano. Because Harry T. Burley was the first to set the spiritual for solo voice. And obviously we're going to sing solo voice without the piano. And so does it no longer become authentic because we have a piano? I would say absolutely not, because none of it is authentic.
Wow.
None of it is in its authentic version of folk music. Anytime folk music leaves its folk tradition, we then have arrangements of it. And those arrangements are influenced.
Right.
So I don't think Brazil's setting of Hush is more significant than Dawson's setting of Sooner Will Be Done, or in his carol. It's not any more significant. Right. It's right. Their interpretation of the folk melody. When they sent the American Conservatory decided that we needed an American voice, and of course we did what Americans often do, and it always intrigues me because Americans are so captured by things, yes. A person with a British accent all of a sudden becomes the preeminent person. And of course, we wanted to find our American voice. And so what did they do? They go over to the Czech Republic and get that person to help find an American voice when we had composers like Edward MacDowell, et cetera, here in America. But Dvorak was the one that said the voice of America is inlaid in the songs of the slaves. And of course, Burley and others were integral in introducing him to this music of our people. Right. So I would say that gospel music becomes something different because it has a composer.
Right. Okay.
And that's what I keep trying to tell young people, that, your arrangements, you aren't composing those arrangements. Right. Those are arrangements. We have no idea what slaves sang that tune. And if you go back and look at slave songs of 1856? Slave Songs of America. That's one of the first times going around and integrating and transcribing this music of slaves. And, it's like playing gossip, the melody changed and, slaves were sold from one plantation to the other. And of course they sang those songs, different variants happened of that music. And so we are able to keep it alive. Right. What the concert arrangements do is do nothing any different than Kodály did with Hungarian folk music.
Right.
Okay. That's what we do. We embrace that folk music and move it into the concert area. And that's what has been done. The simplicity of it, having a spiritual song with a single line, having a spiritual, in 4-part harmony is not unusual, because that's what happened. We were hearing that Southern hymnody, and so we hear it. And Richard Allen wasn't wrong.
Right.
In his settings of what those were. So I think I can appreciate that well. Now, often with spiritual arrangements, other things will come into it. Arrangers will take the spiritual melody, use the spiritual, and have a gospel influence in the spiritual setting. It's just a gospel influence. The harmonies will change. Jazz integrates into that. We're kind of mellifluous as it comes to that, in how arrangers have dealt with it. And gospel music is no different. It's a long way from Dorsey to
influences now. Yes.
Dorsey to Whitfield. That's a whole. You got to get the Martins. In the middle of that, and that whole Chicago sound, and how it also developed. So I would say my definition, it is the music of the slave. There's the sacred music of the slave, and that's where it is for me.
Wow.
I think things can be spiritual in nature. Sometimes we have to designate things like Houston Bright, I Hear a Voice of Praying.
Yes.
That is not a spiritual that's written in the likeness or the form of the spiritual tradition.
Right.
And when most people say they want to hear the authentic spiritual, they don't mean that. They want to hear the spiritual performed by the historical Black colleges during the years when those men were alive. They want to hear what Deck did at Hampton. They want to hear work. They want to hear those kinds. That's what they're calling the authentic spiritual. It is the concert spiritual performed by the historical Black colleges. They do not want to go out in the field and hear those transcriptions that we now have at the Smithsonian of the sounds of the slaves singing those songs. They would go, oh, that's not what I mean. That's not the authentic.
Right.
And I think Brazil in his simplicity was saying, let's go back to what early focuses of that spiritual might have sounded like. And I think he's referring back to people like Richard Allen that began to set it again.
Right.
Because it is based out of hymnody. I mean, they came and sang those what they knew. You know, it's just like addiction. You know, well, why do Black people talk like that? Well, the Kennedys didn't teach us English.
Right.
You know, we got our English language from the South.
Yes.
Right. So I'm sorry, Leo. I just want to
I love it. I just want to go from this point right here. Dr. Thomas has published an amazing book to our audience here that if you want more information about interpreting the spiritual, diction, rhythm, tempos, how to perform performance practices, this is a wonderful compilation way over in Beulah Land, Understanding and Performing the Negro Spiritual, Andre J. Thomas. And you can get it's Heritage Music Press. I highly recommend this book. I highly recommend it. So there are many other books out there, Music of the Island Southern. There are a lot of books that you can read about historically, but this is one of the few valuable tools that will give you accurately the performance practices of how to perform the spiritual and what it all entails. And what I love about it, he gives he talks about the oral tradition. He talks about historically how the spiritual developed. Then he divides in periods of composers from early start to mid-range to modern to contemporary. He divides these composers up, gives us a biographical sketch of their lives. And then he takes specific pieces. As Sooner Will Be Done, he's mentioned 5 composers. Stacey Gibbs' piece, I think, way over in Beulah Land. Different arrangements, and he dissects them and talks about how to interpret them, text-wise, dialect, what the expectation of the composers meant. It is a wonderful document. I think that every musician, school teacher, church musician needs in terms of learning and understanding better how to perform these spirituals correctly. You know, I remember working with Moses Hogan, Dr. Thomas, and I couldn't understand when I was sang with him from 99 to 2003. Every time he would write a set of spirituals, he was adamant about recording. And so I would say, one day I said, you are worrying us to death about these recordings. I mean, he's barely putting them out. He teaches them and we go to do. And there's one where he said, I want people to have documentation on how to perform. He said they need documentation on how to perform. So he was. And so talk to a little bit about what pushed you to put this out. What pushed you with this book?
Well, there were questions. People kept writing. Is there an arrangement of so-and-so? Is there an arrangement of this? You know, and I also wanted to put it out because I like to honor the past. And there's so many incredible arrangements from the past that are out of print. And I had hoped by putting some of those things in, it would invigorate publishers to go back and look at some of those arrangements. Our young arrangers are wonderful. I'm not taking anything away, but our past is historic, you know. Yes. And I wanted to do that. That's number one. There's an index that gives voicing by title, things like that. That's the first thing. The next thing I wanted to do was to make people aware of early transcriptions so that if you remember, there was a lawsuit against Henshaw Music Company. Mr. Dawson had a suit against Henshaw. Gilbert Martin had arranged Balm and Gilead. And Dawson changed two or three notes in the melody of Balm and Gilead. Okay. And one would not know that. Okay. One would not know that, that he changed two or three of those notes. His arrangement of Balm and Gilead was so distinctive that the melody contour that Dawson used, we all used. It's in hymnals. It's in every Dawson had made 3 melodic changes in that, and that's to stay pending until Mr. Dawson died. So I wanted to encourage young arrangers to go back to earlier transcriptions, and rather than to the individual arrangement. So it's not an arrangement of an arrangement. Right. So that's why I talk about the slave song books. That's one of the earliest that you can do. So I wanted to at least make arrangers aware that we had an earlier source prior to work to Burley. We had an earlier source of material, and I wanted them to investigate that. The other thing that was also of interest to me, and Moses and I had a long discussion about this, is that the secular songs of the slaves far exceed the sacred songs of the slaves. Wow. We have hundreds and hundreds of children's songs, work songs, other secular songs. And Moses he started with Mr. Banjo, which is the song.
Right.
So that was the start, but nobody followed up. I did settings of the drinking gourd, which Frederick Douglass tells us that the drinking gourd was there when he talks about the songs sung by the slaves in the Underground Railroad. But we have lots of songs like that, and I would encourage people. I retire this year, and that's going to be one of the things I'm going to start looking at is that secular song, and hopefully I won't be alone in looking at more of what we did. You know us. We were really we had more than just the church side.
Right, exactly.
I hope that we will. Eileen's book, In Their Words, I find also helpful because I resent the fact that we will spend hours doing a word-for-word translation of a Brahms motet, and we'll read all about the history. But when it comes to the music of my people, we'll say, "Oh, let's do it. Let's just have fun," and that's it. Oh, yeah, and exactly. There's only that surface of what that piece actually is. What that book, In Their Words, does is that she goes back and she finds slave dialogue that gives a relationship to those individual pieces, so that we now have the literalness of that, which means what is the scriptural basis of that spiritual, right? Because that was the story, and then the psychological one. Not all of them are just about an escape to freedom, but you can hear and that's why she labels it In Their Words. Right. It's about 500 pages, and a ton of spirituals are covered there. And that makes, with all these tools, it makes the music more accessible for people not from the tradition. And right. I want people not from the tradition to continue to perform our music. I want us to continue to perform our music, not just simply in the academic area.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I appreciate about your church. Okay. Your church says, "Oh no, we're gonna do this music. This is our tradition, and we're gonna do more than our tradition." Yeah. If we could somehow reach all the churches, and I love gospel music, Yes. If it comes out, I'm going to hear it. Of course, my students keep me young, but I'm going to hear it, and I enjoy it. But we are more than simply that. That's why when Patrick Lundy and the ministers of
music,
Yeah, when Patrick came out with that recording, I went, "Yay!"
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
yay,
Yeah.
yay! You know, every church needs to be like yours. Every church needs to have all that variety in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of that
But
variety
you
that
know,
expresses our tradition.
I'm glad you're mentioning that, and I have so many questions. I'm not going to tell you because I know you have a short window of time. You're trying to get to class. It's just I'm so it feels like you're on a lonely island, Doc. It's just
I
you
know.
know, it's
I
just the interest. I mean, it's plowing through. Even being in a place, I celebrate my pastor, Pastor Turner. We were talking the other day about, you know, and all the pastors I've worked with at Mississippi Boulevard, they've never stood in the way of my creativity. They've never said we don't want more of it, and I celebrate that. But I look at the churches, I look around in my own area and region, and it's void. People they're not in, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to try to train or to become knowledgeable of it to even gain. It's I don't know where we are with it with the church. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, Leo, you have to keep teaching in your environment. You know, you have to keep teaching and encouraging those young people who have those skills that can do it. You
Right,
know,
right.
like the Brandons and the Nate Gums and
Yeah,
all those people who you nurture.
yeah,
Who I
right,
nurture. To say,
right,
hey, go out. Show them more of what
right,
life is about, and keep our traditions alive. Uh,
right.
keep them all alive. You
Keep
know,
them all
um, this is our legacy. We don't want to lose our legacy.
right.
And also, we have a responsibility to educate. Education doesn't just happen in the schools. It needs to
Right.
happen. It happens in the church.
Yes, it does.
Okay?
Right.
Education must be there, and I would say keep on doing what you're doing, but keep encouraging others to
Yeah.
do even
Mhm.
more. Um,
Yeah.
and as I hear, um, keep the music exposed. Um,
Mm. Hmm.
the uh, National ACDA convention, my community course premieres my mass,
Yes.
and that mass was inspired by 1978 being the assistant director for the University of Illinois Black Course.
Wow.
A man
Yes.
by the name of Robert Ray was
Right.
the
Right. Right.
and he had just written a mass. It was a premiere, and I was the assistant director and did playing in that mass, and that was quite a definitive mass.
Wow.
And I felt like it's part of my dissertation when I talk about masses of 20th century Black composers because I
Mm.
use the gospel mass as one of those masses, along with George Walker's, Dave Baker's jazz mass. I mean, great, great, great pieces. And so it inspired me that at least I want to make an attempt that elements of that art form are present,
Right.
and we'll hear it. But it was Robert's influence about that inspired that,
Right.
and meeting Father Rivers, who was
Yes. Yes.
we're talking about, Vatican II had come about, and we
Right.
were having all these folk masses, and Father Rivers was all involved with these jazz masses, and his influence with Robert about, hey, how about a gospel mass? What would that be like?
Right.
And Robert Will, an incredible, and that's going to be performed too at the ACDA convention.
Right. Right. Right.
Well, I think his soloist will be a part of that, but Kevin will do that with combined
Yeah.
universities.
Yeah. Right. That's great.
So I think it'll sort of be a celebration,
Yes.
um, and there will always be people who will go,
Right.
there
Right.
always are going to be those people,
Right.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's life.
Right.
But I think for many, it's just going to be like, oh, okay.
Right.
And then rather than saying, oh, our music can only be done by us,
Right.
create avenues so that other people can do our music.
Right.
Let's create other avenues. I remember being in Sweden,
Mm.
I had the concert for the Swedish choral directors, and Helmut had my concert started at midnight. And
Wow.
I said to them, no one will be at a concert at midnight.
Mm.
But that place was packed. And we did and it was an all gospel concert with a group called His Master's Voice.
Wow.
They were outstanding. And Per Henrik had spent 4 years singing with Walter Hawkins when he went back to Sweden. So they were all like members of the Stockholm Symphony.
Right.
That loved that style. And those kids sang. And we closed, of course, with Robert's Gospel Mass.
Mm.
So my mass will start, and it started with its own life of its own. It'll have a performance in November with Vocal Lessons and Minnesota Orchestra. And then the following March 1, it'll be my first time ever conducting in Royal Albert Hall with London Symphony. And they're aiming for a festival course of 900. We'll see. So that's sort of what's on the docket for me once I close the door at Florida State.
Well, you're moving right into everything I was going to ask. I mean, we know that you've been at Florida State, 35 years now?
35, yep.
So we celebrate you, Dr. Thomas, on the amazing work that you've done, facilitated, and the many conductors' lives that you have just talked about earlier, that we have to touch other people. And you've touched many, many, many lives. As you mentioned, the Brandon Boyds, the Waddles. I'm looking at Galen Robinson. I celebrated him when he got ready to leave Mississippi Boulevard and Central High School. I said, Galen, you doing what? He said, I'm catching Thomas before he leaves out of there. And I remember the conversation. He's so excited about it. And you have every life. I could touch so many.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've been blessed to have been a part of those lives, you know.
Yeah.
I remember going to Hampton my first time, you know, and that's where I got to spend more time with Marcus Garrett. You know, that was a whole, you know, and Raymond Wise introduced Marcus to me, and we spent some time together, and I thought he's a talented young man, you know.
Oh yeah.
And we kept in touch during his choral lit class at the University of North Carolina. And I thought, now let me get him in my choral lit class.
Wow.
And now he's teaching at the University of Nebraska.
Yes.
Going on to do extremely fine work, as they are all over the country.
Yes.
So. I'm very proud of them. All of my students. It now is. There's hardly a state that I don't have a student who is either director of choral activities or professor of choral music ed. So that's my legacy, more than my own conducting. That's for sure. They are indeed it. My students, who I so love. You know, I looked at the state of Texas. And Texas has always been rather insular, but there are 8 Florida State grads as director of choral activities in Texas, of all places. So, and having lived through Texas in 1980, that's a miracle. But I'm so proud, and God's been awfully good to me. And through my students, I've met more people. You know, I got to know more people. People like Deidre and Diane and all those people I met at the Hampton Institute symposium, and been able to appreciate and revel in their works, what they are doing, you know, or what Carlos is doing. Carlos Simon is doing with his composition in the instrumental world. And Paul Morvac just did a big oratorio that was premiered in New York this past season. You know, our young people are incredible.
Yes,
they just are incredible. And the thing that, you know, we have to celebrate them and not be jealous of them.
Yeah, right. You know? That's right.
Celebrate.
That's right. Well, Doc, you have given so much, and we notice now for ACDA, I know some may understand what we're saying when we hear ACDA, the American Choral Directors Association, be celebrating their 60th anniversary, February 26th. So we are all headed to Kansas City. And Dr. Thomas is the national president-elect.
That's right. And I'm already planning 2021, that's my convention to plan in Dallas.
Yes.
Yay. Let's hope the president doesn't shut down the nation again, and the plane, and we can get to, and I'm praying that God will be gracious.
Yes.
And not give us a real Kansas winter on the 27th.
But we're looking forward to your mass, the performance of it. There's so many wonderful things happening. We noticed the Aeolians will be a part of that.
Absolutely. Aren't you proud of him?
You're bringing your entire community. That is a huge course. How many singers are coming?
Well, I'm not bringing all of them. My course is age 17 to 85 plus.
Wow.
Some of my 85-year-olds are going though.
Wow.
And some of them have to sit in chairs, but they're going to be there. There are 300 in the choir. I'm bringing about 190.
Wow, you're bringing 190 singers. So that performance is going to be happening. Anything else? Tell us a little bit about the mass. You mentioned a little bit the kinds of the influences from Robert Ray, and that was I know Robert Ray. You and Antoine Armstrong, all you were attending U of I at around the same time, correct?
Yeah, Antoine was in the master's program, and I was in the doctoral program. He likes to always remind people that he's younger than I am. But we were in school, and in the music ed program was Tom Hager. I don't know if you know that name.
I remember the name. Yes.
Yeah. Tom was there. Tom didn't sing in the black chorus, but Anton did that semester that Robert was doing it. Now it's under Ollie Watts Davis.
Right.
Do just incredible things.
Yes.
When Ollie came, and my last years of being conductor of that, Ollie was my assistant there, and then took over the choirs.
Wow.
Because she was in school at that time.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
She was earning a degree from Grace Wilson.
Who was over the choral department at that time? Was it Don Moses or was it Decker?
It was Harold Decker.
Harold Decker. That's it.
Yeah, I called Harold's grandson, and Danny said, "Grandpapa is coming to a concert, and he wants to talk to you after the concert." And I said, "Okay." I didn't know who he was.
Wow.
He came in. He said, "Are you interested in getting a doctorate?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Can you do what you're doing now at age 55?" I said, "Nope." So that man flew me to Champaign-Urbana, and that's how I began. He's also the one that took me to my first ACDA convention.
Wow.
Yeah. I owe Harold immensely.
Tell us, Doc. So we know that I'm going to wind up because I know it's around the time that you need to get going. Tell us what's next on the horizon for you. So you're retiring. You've played. You're overseas. You're conducting festival choirs. All this. So what's next after Florida State? What do you perceive? What's next?
Well, we're going to move from Tallahassee so that my successor can have a complete freedom.
Wow.
So that I'm not here overshadowing, because Florida State has been good to me and I have nothing but good things to say about it. And I want the program to continue to grow. Yes. So we're going to relocate. We decided Jacksonville because that's where I was getting cancer treatment in 2016. We liked it. We're going to downsize and be there, and it has an airport with cheaper tickets than Tallahassee.
Right.
So I would suppose that I'm doing that. I'm doing 3 residencies at different universities in the fall. I have Southern Mississippi first, then Mr. Choir College. Then I'm going to be the Green Chair at Texas Christian University. Then I'm going to have a residency at the University of Louisiana Monroe. So those are just the residencies. And then it's the honor. I still have honor choirs. They still want an old man to do honor choirs with all these incredibly young people. So I'll be doing that. Hopefully I'll be able to write. I'll be able to watch more Netflix.
Right.
So
Wow.
I'm looking forward to that. I told the Netherlands that they're looking forward to me having a little more time, so I
Yeah.
can perhaps take some longer residencies. I did the Bernstein White House cantata with them last summer, so we that will probably open up for something else. I don't want anything permanently. I don't want to move to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow. Tell us, tell us, Doc. We're just about one more question. What are some valuable lessons that you've learned throughout your career? Share with us what are some lessons you say you've learned throughout all of your career, all of your
I
experience?
think the most valuable lesson for me is not to covet the talents or the gifts of anyone else.
Mm,
God is gracious.
yes.
He gives talent to a lot of people.
Yes.
And I think to know that I can only be who I am and what God has given me, and it's good
Right.
enough. It's
Yes.
just it's absolutely good enough. Um, for 40 years, Anton Armstrong has probably been my best friend, and we've 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 been best friends for 40 years. And I think one of the things, personally and professionally, he has always had my back, and I've
Mm,
always had his. And
yes.
the thing of it is, don't forget that you need good friends. You
Yes.
need you
Wow.
need you need some people that will tell you when something's not awry. Somebody will help you. Somebody will you can trust that they have your best at heart. Um,
Right.
and as I tell my grad students now, I met him in grad school, and
Mm,
doctoral students were not supposed to be in the world of the master students. Okay,
right.
but there was just us. So it was like, forget that nonsense. Forget
Right.
that nonsense.
Right.
Embrace a person who's kind. You know, don't be
Yeah.
jealous. I remember my first year at University of Texas. He called and he was telling me he was preparing the Poulenc Gloria for Catherine Comey with his Grand Rapids Symphony chorus. What are you working on now, Andre? And I said, I'm working on New York, New York.
Wow.
With my group. That's what I'm working on. New York, New York.
Right.
And I thought it's really interesting. There's that situation there, and now I am conducting two major works, the three major works a semester.
Wow. Wow.
So it all comes around.
Yes.
You got to pay your dues.
Yes.
You got to
Yes.
pay. And be happy. Be happy to pay those dues. Respect your elders.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I talk about Shakespeare. I talk about William Dawson. I mean, I got to talk about Colin Kirk. Away for me. I got to talk about Don Henshaw. He paved the way for me. They allowed it, and I have to pay that forward if it means. I remember being sick, and obviously they were doing a whole festival of my music in Nebraska, and I was getting cancer treatments, and I said, well, you trust me on this. Brendan can do this. He can do this. You hire him, or a number of times. You look at Jeff Ames. He can do this, You want a director of choral activities that will be sensational? Look at Christopher Ospas in Texas Christian.
Wow.
He can do this.
Wow, that is you are you're amazing. So your last statement, just tell us, we have a diverse audience, as I mentioned. We have singers, musicians, pastors. I see a few Moses Hogan singers. Bridget Bazile.
Oh
Hello,
my
Bridget. She's they're so excited to hear you. So tell us 3 core standards for musical excellence, Doc, that you deem are necessary to ascertain musical excellence. What do you say 3 core standards that you would need?
Well, you can't, I would say number one, you cannot achieve musical excellence unless you put in the time to know the music that you're trying to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing the music that you're trying to perform is to know it on more than one level. You have to know its compositional structure and how it fits. You have to know how the voices fit. I'm telling my conducting majors, oh no, you've got to know cadentially where this is going and which part is really making the tension and the cadence. Is this relaxing here or is this intensifying? I've got to know that. I've got to know the text, I was just telling the conducting class, there's not a full score of mine that you won't get that will not have a word for word translation. Wow. It's crucial. I mean, when you're doing music in other languages, the word order is different. You've got to know what the composer intended on that word. You've got to know that. Then after you do all that, you got to sing every single part so that you feel what it feels like in the voice. And you gotta sing the parts in the orchestra too. You gotta know what the violas are doing and how that all fits together. And then the last part is you gotta fall in love with it. You have to fall in love with it. And the crazy thing about falling in love with it is that there's gonna be music that you just don't like that you have to conduct.
Yeah.
Wow. And you have to find a way to fall in love with it.
Yes.
Whether or not I'm doing a piece with electronic tape, how do I fall in love with it? I remember with the chamber choir when we did the Collect for Peace of Leslie Bassett for tape and choir, or the Jennifer Warning to the Rich, where we have all kinds of 20th century techniques. Fall in love, learn it, grow, and be grateful for every opportunity. Yesterday, my men's course was doing David Childs, who's another student, setting of Where Your Barefoot Walks for men's voices. And I had, the piece was originally SATB, and I conducted it at David's wedding, where we had members of Conspirari that sang at the wedding. So it was interesting to come back to it. But then I was thinking, I have to make an aesthetic moment in every rehearsal. Is there that moment where the singers go, oh, that's a goal. Then they fall in love with it. Then they want to be there. And my boys, I tell you, they keep you young because I got all kinds of majors in there. And if you see them, they look all kinds of ways, braids and everything else and eyelashes and you name it. I got it in my men's course, okay? I got it in my men's course, and they teach me a lot.
Yes.
But no matter how diverse they are, an aesthetic moment can be felt by all.
Yes. Wow, this is great, Doc. I am so appreciative. I hope you all got those last thoughts. I wrote all 5 down. 1, you must know your music. 2, study the text. Know the text word for word. 3, you must know all parts of the music repertoire in terms of chorus, orchestral parts, if you're dealing with that. 4, fall in love with the music, and then be grateful for every opportunity. Oh, wow, those are almost closing thoughts. That's really a wonderful closing thought. I really appreciate just a few announcements, Doc, and I'm going to let you go. We do have, again, I want to make sure the audience make you aware of Doc's book. Again, I see you're asking for it. Way Over in Beulah Land. I'll put it on my website. I'll take a picture, snapshot of it, and send it to you. But Way Over in Beulah Land. I don't think I'm holding this.
You can go right to J.W. Pepper.
J.W. Pepper is the easiest way to get it. And Understanding of the Performing the Negro Spiritual, Andre Thomas, J.W. Pepper. Also, you get a chance. I'm excited about these books are finally out. The workbook. You like that picture, Doc? I'm going to send it to you.
I love the picture.
The workbook and the book are out. No Gimmicks 2.0. God's Child Publishing, and I'm really excited about the work that has gone into these two, the book and the workbook. So it's here is very helpful tools for you that are in worship ministry. I do want to mention the Umoja celebration. We're excited about that at the Boulevard. It's February 24th. It's a Sunday morning at 9:45. We're combining all of our services to one. Lamont Rucker from Greenleaf is our guest actor. Of course, we have Stilt Walkers from New Orleans will be with us. It's going to be an amazing, amazing event. We're also getting notifications you're interested in the Good Friday service. We normally have 7 last words in the morning. We're doing something different this year. We're calling it a jazz vesper service on Friday, Good Friday evening, with our special guest Cyrus Chestnut of New York City.
Wow.
He's doing amazing work entitled The Saga of the Cross. So I'm going to open that up to the entire Memphis community. Those of you that would like to sing with us, the rehearsals will convene on Tuesday evenings, starting the first week in March. So we'll have about 4 or 5 sessions, probably more than that, because of Chestnut is coming in the middle of April. He's going to work with us for about two or three rehearsals the week of. So you're invited to do that. And then our major Easter celebration will be coming up with Crystal Rucker will be with us the entire day. She's from Kansas City. So she'll be with us the entire day of Easter Sunday. So we have a lot coming up. Yes, a Vesper service. Yes, I see you. I see Ricky Draper is there. He's speaking to you. Everybody's speaking to you, Doc. So I have a last.
Hello, and to all my former students, if I didn't mention you by name, I certainly love you to death. You know,
and we're going to see ACDA. They're all coming. They're all coming to ACDA. So again,
good. And also to my former students, April 13th is my final concert to conduct on the stage. So if you're planning, come back that day. It's going to be a glorious.
Tell us more. That April 13th, what time and where again, Doc? Where's it going to be?
7:30 p.m. at Ruby Diamond Auditorium. All of the choirs will be singing, including all 300 other community chorus will be singing, plus all of the other choirs at FSU will be singing, the University Symphony Orchestra. It's going to be predominantly my music, but it will open with Perry's I Was Glad with some 800 singers singing. You know, the second half opens with Zadok the priest, of course, of Ham.
Yes.
Those were two missionaries things, and a lot of Thomas.
Wow. So this is
the last time in Tallahassee to conduct.
And that's your final performance at FSU.
That'll be it.
Wow.
I won't do anything else after that.
I was going to do a quote from your book by W.D. Du Bois that you did. It was wonderful. But the items that you gave us, I hope people pay careful attention in terms of how to ascertain to acquire musical excellence. But I'll go ahead with this quote. This quote. This was wonderful. Little beauty has America given to the world, save the rude grandeur God himself stamped on her bosom. The human spirit in this new world has expressed itself in vigor and ingenuity rather than in beauty. And so by fateful chance, the Negro folk song, the rhythmic cry of the slave stands today, not simply as the soul American music, but as the most beautiful expression of human experience born this side of the seas. It has been neglected, it has been and is half despised, and above all, it has been persistently mistaken and misunderstood. But notwithstanding, it still remains as the singular spiritual heritage of the nation and the greatest gift of the Negro people. From the Souls of Black Folk, W.E. Du Bois. Again, audience, we want to encourage you, remember those points about attaining musical excellence. I want to repeat these. Dr. Thomas has shared with us, know your music, know the text, word for word interpretation. You must know all your parts, know everything that embodies the music, know it wholeheartedly from chorus to orchestra, rhythm section, whatever that is. Fall in love with the music and be grateful for every opportunity. Dr. Thomas, would you mind closing us in a word of prayer? Would you mind?
Sure.
Okay.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the day We thank you, Lord, that we're still here.
Yes.
We ask your blessings upon Leo Davis and the work that he does, both at Mississippi Boulevard and how he spreads himself throughout this country in this kind of format, or whether or not it's at a conference, or the encouraging hand he pats on the back for so many people, including me. I ask you, Father, to bless all out there. I ask you to bless our country. We need your help. We need your guidance. Make us receptive to the learning that you're trying to teach us. These are other blessings we ask in your son Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I forgot to mention our guest for next week. Next Friday at 9 a.m. will be the father and son duo, Brandon Waddles and Alvin Waddles. That's going to be amazing. That's the father and son duo. That's next week. Brandon Waddles and Alvin Waddles. They're going to be great. Doc, again, love you much. I'm going to try to see you. I'll see you in a few weeks at ACDA convention.
Okay.
And thank you again for your time. Please share this. Please share. Take care. Have a great day, Doc.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.